into authentic conversations about ourselves and our community, exploring topics that uplift and inspire us, from personal growth to social change. So grab your teacup and get ready to join the conversation.
Saw injuries to Cassie's eyes, her legs, her arms. She said essentially that Cassie would cover up her injuries with makeup, something that Cassie herself testified to while she was on the stand. She mentioned another incident, and this was an incident over up in Central Park, just, blocks and blocks up from here, where she witnessed Diddy punch Cassie in the face with a closed fist at this festival at Central Park where Dirty Money was going to be performing. She said after this incident that Cassie came into the bathroom. She was crying while Dawn and Kalina Harper, who was, again, her then bandmate on Dirty Money, were getting ready for a performance. And Dawn says that she saw Cassie's eyes swelling, and she being Cassie, just put on some makeup and then put on her sunglasses. And Dawn said that she'd stayed with Cassie for support after this incident. Then we see an exhibit photo of Cassie, Dawn, and Kalina Harper all at this festival, all up in Central Park. All of the women were with their sunglasses. But this picture was a little different than some of the other exhibit photos that Cassie herself has turned over to the government, where we couldn't necessarily see the injuries under her sunglasses because it was kind of just like a group photo. Other people were around. You could tell that Kalina, Cassie, and Dawn Richard were all wearing sunglasses. And she was asked, why are you guys all wearing sunglasses? And Dawn responded, it was in solidarity of Cassie, essentially. Then there was another incident the following year in 2010 that Dawn Richard had witnessed, where she saw Diddy punch Cassie in the stomach. This was at a dinner that they were all having together. Celebrities were there. She had mentioned Usher was there and Nia was there, but she had also mentioned, again, a lot of Diddy's employees themselves, such as Harpier, again, president of Bad Boy. You had D-Rock there, who works security. Kalina Harper there, a part of Dirty Money. Nia there, she worked for security, she worked with Diddy. And then Bond, who was part of security, were all there. Then we see an exhibit photo of Harpier, again, him being president of Bad Boy. And she was asked a little bit about Harpier's role and whether or not Harpier was her boss, but she had clarified that she had reported to Sean Combs, even though Harpier was the president of Bad Boy at the time. And then nobody intervened during this situation. So as they're all driving back, they were on a Sprinter van. On the Sprinter van were Kalina, Dawn, Cassie, Diddy, and D-Rock. D-Rock was the one who was driving, and that Cassie actually confronted Diddy about punching her in the stomach, essentially saying that it was embarrassing that he had did this in front of other people. And Dawn Richard recalled Diddy slapping Cassie in the mouth, and that Cassie just looked out of the window for the rest of the ride. Dawn Richard was asked specifically questions about Cassie's career, as far as that Cassie just wanted to do more in career, says that Dawn supported this, and that she even offered to write songs for Cassie during this, but that Diddy just didn't like that Kalina Harper and Dawn Richard were essentially talking to Cassie Diddy had told Cassie when Diddy's ready, then that's when they could work on Cassie's career. And so I could see where the prosecution was kind of going with this as far as asking Don Richard these types of questions, kind of painting the picture that Cassie had no other choice but to continue on living this type of life, knowing that her career was kind of in the hands of Diddy. So I could see kind of where they were going with this. But Don Richard recalled one specific moment where Diddy told her that he didn't like that Kalina and Don were speaking to Cassie. He said something along the lines of, "Stay the F out of my relationship. You mother effers don't know real work." And so Don had said just kind of how Diddy was just so kind of mean to them when speaking with them. She was asked about Diddy's drug use and whether or not she saw or witnessed Diddy doing drugs. She says she has, including weed, ketamine, coke, molly, ecstasy, and said that a lot of these drugs were brought often to the studio or even at Diddy's house. And she said that these drugs were actually delivered by a man named One Stop. We all saw an exhibit photo of this man named One Stop, because at first when I was jotting down my notes, I was like, what is, but that was actually, I guess, his moniker, One Stop, and that One Stop was kind of a play on that you're one stop away and you can get the drugs, that type of thing. So it was a little funny kind of knowing that nickname behind it. But Don Richard had talked about how One Stop had delivered coke, Plan B, weed, molly, essentially everything to Diddy at the studio. And Don had said that she saw Diddy put drugs in his Louis Vuitton pouch, something that other people have testified to, something that when the HSI agent had testified on Friday that we had seen inside Diddy's room when he was arrested, and Don said that Diddy would carry drugs in this Louis Vuitton pouch, and he would carry these drugs domestically and internationally. She was asked, did you observe Diddy give drugs to Kalina and possibly Cassie too? And she said that she did. She was asked about weapons, whether or not Diddy had weapons on him while he was in the studio. She said she did see Diddy with a handgun in the studio around the 2009-2010 time frame. He normally would carry this handgun in his lower waist or even his back. He would even carry this gun to the club as well too. But D-Rock and Bonds also carried guns for Diddy because they worked security. So then towards the end of her testimony, she was asked a little bit about why she parted ways with Diddy, and said that she continued to even stay in contact with Diddy after parting ways. Dawn said that if she didn't pick up the phone, the phone situation, that he would just call and call and call, and if no one was answering, then he'd get assistants to call. Dawn said she experienced that for herself, where she said that his assistants and management would call her if she wasn't answering Diddy's calls himself. She says that she stayed pleasant, and this is something that I thought was interesting, Jesse, mainly because, for the longest time, myself would just think that as far as Diddy's relationship with Don Richard specifically, that it was a special one, because I was a huge fan of making the band back when I was younger, and I remember Diddy specifically kind of having his eyes on Dawn just as she would be the superstar, and he kind of propped her up and propelled her up. And so we all thought that, they had a great relationship. So even it was surprising when Dawn had filed her lawsuit against Diddy a few months back, and even her talking about it under testimony today, she said that she stayed pleasant with Diddy essentially because she was scared of him, and said that she just wanted to exchange pleasantries, even referred to him as bro, something that I think she doesn't necessarily mean, but just said it because I think she just wanted to continue to maintain that relationship in a professional way, but still witnessing all of this. So I thought that was an interesting moment that she had talked about today. She said that she didn't disclose the violence because she was told not to disclose this by Diddy and as well as even Harve Pierre. But she said everything kind of changed for her when Cassie took a stand and told her truth and that was Cassie filing her lawsuit. Obviously, everything kind of happened afterwards. And then she said that she, being Dawn, referred to her lawsuit specifically as something that referred to herself, as far as just all the allegations that she put in. Because
in a world where you've constantly been told what you can't do,
put in her civil claim just weren't necessarily during her testimony today, especially under direct. But she says that this lawsuit is still pending, and she said she's not aware of any type of settlement in the case so far. She said that she wasn't expecting compensation, which is interesting because under a cross-examination, she said she was expecting compensation as far as the time that she had worked, but under direct, she said she wasn't expecting compensation, but she was essentially just expecting justice, and that just wrapped up her direct testimony.
Right.
So they touched upon a lot of key points, I think, to kind of help solidify Cassie's claims, but when I tell you the cross-examination was a cross-examination to watch, it definitely was.
So I was taking notes of what you were saying, and a couple things here. Yes, so she filed her own lawsuit, if I remember correctly, accusing Diddy of groping her, imprisoning her, threatening her life. I think when she tried to intervene, you're right, there were aspects of that weren't a part of her direct examination. By the way, when we did the lunchtime show on Law and Crimes YouTube, I remember at least one of the questions we got from our viewers was, how come this wasn't brought up? How come this wasn't brought up? And it seemed it was very specific. So for me, from a legal point of view, I think she did a couple of things, right? So obviously she corroborated Cassandra Ventura Fine's account that she was physically abused, but that is doubled down by the video, the 2016 video, the photographs of Cassandra Ventura Fine's alleged injuries, other witness testimony, her testimony that she was physically abused. But I think what she also did very well, or at least I think what the prosecution was trying to assert, why she didn't come forward. Why didn't she speak out? Why didn't she confront Diddy? Though that is very consistent with why Cassandra Ventura arguably didn't leave the relationship or go to the authorities or speak out. The power, the influence, the threats, those are key factors that the jury has to consider. And when you talk about the guns and you talk about the violence, that goes to the means and the methods of the racketeering charge. So the prosecution has said that he is operating this criminal enterprise, that it was engaged in a pattern of illegal conduct, and that he would use violence and intimidation and his resources and his assistance and his power to silence people and to commit these crimes and to cover it up, which is, by the way, why I think it's so important that Dawn Richard talked about how there were assistants involved, their security, and saw what was going on but did nothing. So it seems that her testimony not only helped or tried to corroborate Cassandra Ventura's account, but also tied in and tried to prove some of the elements of racketeering. And by the way, talking about the drugs, that could go to the predicate crime. So remember, racketeering, the prosecution has to prove at least two underlying crimes. There's forced labor, there's drug trafficking, there's sex trafficking, obstruction, bribery, arson. You talk about the drugs, you could see how that might tie into that. Now, let's talk about the cross-examination, okay? I thought that this was quite notable from what I was reading on the notes, but obviously the notes don't serve justice because you were in the courtroom to see all the cross-examination. So, A, who did the cross-examination of Dawn Richard, and what were the highlights of the cross-examination?
Well, a lot of us were initially thinking that it was going to be Mark Agnifilo doing the cross-examination because on Friday he was the one posing all the objections, but then he clarified with the judge earlier today outside of the presence of the jury that it wasn't going to be Mark Agnifilo doing the questioning. It's actually going to be Nicole Westmoreland, and she was somebody who would come onto the Diddy defense team a little later on, pretty close to trial essentially, but a lot of us may know her because she had previously represented one of the YSL defendants and she had previously kind of worked with Brian Steele in that capacity, but this was the first time we actually saw her kind of doing her work inside this trial, inside this courtroom. And it was something to see because let me tell you something, Jesse, Nicole Westmoreland, she is a little tiny as far as just her height and her stature, but man, she is mighty and she delivered a mighty cross-examination, let me tell you. Initially, when they were first talking to her being Dawn Richard, they were asking her about her lawsuit. Of course, they were asking about whether or not she was aware of the motion to dismiss and whether or not that this was pending matter that she had even known about, and Dawn said that she wasn't aware. She said she wasn't aware of a demand letter. She said, and this is something interesting, that she had filed her suit in September of 2024, which was just a few weeks, from my understanding, before Diddy was even arrested. Then she was asked how many times she had spoken to federal prosecutors. Dawn wasn't necessarily sure about the number. Nicole Westmoreland was like, did you speak with them about 8 times? Is that kind of fair for me to say? And she said she couldn't recall how many times she had.
If you've got pink salt, apple cider vinegar, and baking soda in your kitchen and you're not using this recipe yet, you're throwing away your chance to lose weight effortlessly. Today, I'm here to teach you how to make the new Japanese pink salt recipe for fast weight loss. I started using this 4-ingredient homemade recipe last month, and I lost a lot, like a lot. It mimics the effects of those famous Lilly weight loss pills, except this one's 100% natural. But I had to stop because I was literally disappearing inside my clothes. My doctor even told me to eat more burgers and skip the gym just so I wouldn't have to donate my entire wardrobe. As a single mom of 2, I barely have time to breathe, so I decided to try this Japanese pink salt trick to drop a few sizes fast, but I did not expect these results. Just to give you an idea, I dropped 3 pant sizes in a single month. My mom cried when she saw me walk in wearing a tight size M dress, and honestly, I thought I was stuck.
How many times she had spoken to federal prosecutors prior to her testimony. The defense asked her, and this was a very key point throughout her entire cross-examination, was, have your answers changed over time? And then that's when Nicole Westmoreland was just kind of boom, 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 boom. You change this, 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 and this. Because when they got to the egg skillet incident, Nicole Westmoreland asked on Friday, you testified that Cassie was cooling eggs. Diddy comes downstairs, he hits Cassie with the skillet, and then she drops into the fetal position. Dawn said that yes, she did say this, and she said, is this the first time you've spoken about this incident? And then she said she did speak about this in her civil lawsuit, and she spoke about it with prosecutors, and she's speaking about it during her testimony. And then they brought back the civil lawsuit to talk about it because she claimed in the lawsuit specifically that she didn't see the pan actually hit Cassie during this entire incident. And she, being Nicole Westmoreland, asked, are you aware on your behalf that you heard something but not saw something? Then there was an objection. That objection was sustained. Then Nicole Westmoreland asked her, you told the government that he attempted to hit her. You need to tell the truth, and that she was essentially giving 2 different stories. Then they brought back her interview March of just this year, where she had told prosecutors that Diddy threw eggs at Cassie in this incident, and that the pan didn't hit Cassie during this incident. And then she was kind of asked, okay, did he throw the eggs? Did he throw the pan? Did he hit her? Did he hit her? What was it? And then Nicole Westmoreland was like, is it hard for you to keep your story straight? And then Dawn said, again, Dawn being kind of very soft-spoken when she's giving her testimony, says, I told it to the best of my recollection. Then she was asked again about the whole people go missing statement that she had made on Friday and even today, just as far as insinuating that people go missing just equates to a death threat. Nicole Westmoreland said, this is not the first time that you explained that incident because you sat down with prosecutors. And then that's when she started going by all these different dates. She's in 2024. Diddy had told Dawn, and this was according to the statements that she had made to federal prosecutors, that this was a passionate argument, and that the defense says you didn't tell prosecutors at this time the whole where I'm from, people go missing part. Then in the March 18, 2025 interview, this is, I guess, her second interview with federal prosecutors, the defense says that you didn't tell prosecutors about the whole people go missing part. Dawn says, I'm answering the questions as best as I can. Then in April, she was asked about the whole egg incident again with federal prosecutors. And again, these conversations that are being had with federal prosecutors aren't with Diddy present, aren't with Diddy's defense attorneys present. And so essentially it's just Dawn and other witnesses meeting with federal prosecutors, essentially going over their statements and what their testimony could look like, that type of thing. But during this April 17th meeting, which was just a few weeks before trial, they spoke about this egg incident again. And Dawn apparently, or reportedly, didn't bring up this people go missing claim, and she didn't bring this claim up again until May 10th, according to the defense. So the defense was really just kind of like, you need to be honest about this. They were really just saying, why do you have to be, why, if you're not scared that Diddy is there and you're not scared about Diddy's threats, then why weren't you just more forthcoming with prosecutors? Why didn't you bring up these types of incidents? And so they were really just kind of getting her to kind of admit or kind of trip her up there a little bit. Then she was asked about these other incidents, such as the dinner incident with celebrities there. And that's when you start to hear the names of Neo and Usher being present at this incident. And
to go get the 3-on-6. My name is Melissa. I grew up hating my.
She was asked, why didn't she mention that other celebrities were there? She really only mentioned that Diddy's employees were there. And that she wasn't asked what celebrities were there. And so then they bring her civil claim or her civil again and talk about how there was this incident in the civil lawsuit where Diddy allegedly dragged Cassie out of a car, but to the federal government, she was saying that this didn't happen and that she was actually misquoted from her lawyer, which I thought was kind of a little interesting there because her lawyers are sitting inside the courtroom when this testimony is going on. And so she kind of essentially blamed that this was kind of a mischaracterization from her attorneys when they were drafting or writing up that lawsuit. Then she was asked about the Central Park Festival and the whole incident there where Diddy allegedly punched or I believe slapped Cassie in the face. And she was asked, you know, was there a camera crew there? Because they were reportedly filming something during this, and that Dawn was quick to say that this whole incident wouldn't be on video, and that they weren't actually filming in the bathroom. So whatever camera crew was present didn't capture just, I guess, the interaction between Cassie, Kalina, and Dawn Richard inside this bathroom. And so at one point, I thought they were going to bring up the video inside the courtroom, but we didn't see any type of video, I guess, from this whole day or anything like that. And then she was asked, the defense said she was never alone with Diddy. There was always someone else there, like Kalina Harper. Kalina Harper, I think, kind of pretty interestingly, after Dawn Richard's out, Kalina Harper kind of made this statement, or she did interview, just essentially kind of denying Dawn's claims that she didn't witness Diddy beat Cassie, and there's been kind of a lot of hiccups there. So I think as far as Kalina Harper is concerned, I think that it's possibly the defense might use Kalina Harper to kind of dispel what Dawn Richard had to say, maybe possibly as a defense witness, but I'm not 100% sure there, so I just definitely want to point that out there. Then Dawn was asked about the guns and whether or not Diddy's security team brought guns around because protecting this mega celebrity. And so, of course, his bodyguards are going to be carrying guns around. And she was asked, what instances did you see Diddy carry these guns? And she said that she saw one incident at the studio in New York, another incident here in New York, another incident at Diddy's house, also in New York. And Dawn said that she never saw Diddy wave a gun around or load it or put bullets in it. But she just reaffirmed she did see Diddy with a gun. Then she was asked about drugs again, kind of going piece by piece about kind of dispelling her testimony under direct there. But she was asked, was there ever a time that you pretended to do drugs? And Dawn said that she did. Then she had testified today she saw Diddy do cocaine, but didn't tell this to prosecutors during her October interview. And during her October interview, according to the defense, she never said that she saw Diddy do any type of cocaine.
Okay, so I'm going to stop it there and sip some tea. Miss Miller goes really fast, but we're staying with her. Dawn Richard was pretending to do drugs. Now, I don't know if y'all saw the Dawn Richard interview she had on, one second, let me find it, because I did a review on it, but for some reason it kept like glitching, so I couldn't really upload it to YouTube, but it's on my Facebook. Hold on. Dawn Richard's interview. Okay. She did an interview on one of the like Dark Underbelly podcasts. I can't recall it at the second. It's not coming up. Okay. But like I said, I reviewed it over on Facebook. And Dawn Richard didn't look like she was pretending to use drugs. Okay. She looks like at some point in time, she may have delved deep into some drugs with someone at some point in time, because during the said interview, she seemed whacked out of her mind. Okay.
And everyone saw the interview. It was on one of like the Dark Underbelly podcasts, and we wouldn't look at that and say she was pretending. Okay.
And Dawn admitted during this time, because really Nicole Westmoreland was really just kind of like poking every hole that she really needed to poke here. Dawn admitted that over time her story has changed because all these events happened so long ago, and I think that kind of worked into her favor as far as why she wasn't recalling some of these. We're talking about 2008, 2009, it's 2025, and I think she was kind of, essentially saying that this was a long time ago, and so that's why kind of her memory has been a little back and forth there. She was asked about One Stop, and then when they were referring to One Stop, again, this being this alleged drug dealer that would bring Diddy drugs to the studio.
Whether you're looking for more flexibility in your schedule or personalized support from licensed teachers, we can meet your child's unique.
She was asked who gave payment to One Stop, and she being Dawn told the government she never saw anyone give payment to One Stop. And so there was kind of that. And so that was another moment where it's just like, oof. But as far as just the threats that Dawn says that she had went through, she said that she had felt scared just during her time working with Diddy, that she departed with Bad Boy in 2011. And the defense says that she being Dawn Richard, actually asked Diddy to come back because she wanted to work with him again. And the defense says that there was times that Dawn herself initiated communications with Diddy on several occasions, even though Dawn was allegedly scared of Diddy. And so then they were talking about.
And I'm going to pause it right there. We have also been made to understand that Dawn was touring with Diddy in some capacity, in some type of tour capacity, recently, up until like 2023 or 24, until Diddy started getting into these legal matters, and then it fizzled off. Okay, so yeah.
Dawn Richard's career overall, just how they sold hundreds of thousands of records with Danity Kane, something I think was interesting that they had talked about, because given that Aubrey O'Day, one of her former bandmates, had talked about how much they all got for publishing, essentially that being $300, something that Dawn didn't talk about during her testimony today, but just something, for our viewers to kind of understand that the defense was trying to paint it as they sold hundreds of thousands of records, they got a claim, all this stuff, but then in the back of their mind, they really didn't get much money from their actual deal working with Diddy. But the defense talked about how Diddy didn't even want to sign Dawn Richard as a solo artist, but that Dawn continued to reach out to Diddy even again as late as 2020, 2021. The defense claims that Dawn was angry about the dismantling of the group. I think they were referring to either both Danity Kane and Dirty Money, or just Dirty Money itself. But Dawn essentially said that she was saddened by the whole situation. She was asked about Cassie's lawsuit as well, too, and said that, did you file your lawsuit shortly after Cassie filed her suit? And she said yes, which I think was kind of a little misleading there, because it wasn't really directly after that Dawn Richard filed her lawsuit. It was almost a year after that she had filed her suit. But I think probably to the jury, they might think, oh, Cassie filed her suit, Dawn filed her suit right after, and that essentially they just are after money from this this mogul who has a lot of money, and that Dawn said that she wanted to file her suit to get compensation for her work, essentially something different that she had told under direct, where she had said that she just wanted justice, but under cross-examination, it was that she did.
This is what my house looks like, and I haven't cleaned in 3 months. That's because I have someone come and do it for me twice a month through HomeGlass.
She did want compensation for the work that she felt like she was owed while she was a recording artist for Sean Combs. And so I think under the redirect, the prosecution was really just kind of talking about the threats that Diddy allegedly made as far as keeping quiet and people going missing. They were talking about Dawn's work experience with Diddy, how it was a volatile work environment, she had said, that essentially every meeting that she informed the government of Cassie's physical assault. So that was something that she didn't change throughout her testimony. That was something that kind of was a sticking point throughout all of her meetings with the government. Again, she was asked about the egg skillet incident, and then that kind of just ended the redirect. And then under the recost, it was kind of the same thing. Just you reached out to Diddy very recently. You were trying to kind of engage on making the band this reboot that they were trying to do a few years ago. You were trying to get everything back together, and if you were so scared of Diddy, why would you try to get Dirty Money back together? And that was essentially because she was trying to help out Kalina Harper, but then Nicole Westmoreland was like, you know what all that entails. If you were to get the group back together, you'd have to do tours, you'd have to be in hotels together, you have to do appearances together, interviews together, travel together. And Dawn essentially had to say, you know, she was willing to do that, also while saying that she was feeling threatened and intimidated by Diddy. So the cross-examination was a little rough. It was a little hard to watch, but I think, you know, to Nicole Westmoreland's point, she kind of did what she had to do, which was have a lot of people thinking, wow, if you said this under the rec, but you said this under cross, really, what can I believe? And I think the defense did a really good job there at kind of getting to that point.
Yeah, she raised a number of questions about her credibility, about Dawn Richard's credibility. You know, a witness who has inconsistent statements or says things allegedly at the first time or near a trial. Juries sometimes don't look favorably upon that. The idea of a financial incentive and motivation, same thing we heard with Cassandra Ventura. Before we move on to the next witness, real quick, Elizabeth, I know it's impossible to know, but how is the jury reacting to the cross-examination of Dawn Richard? Were they attentive? Were they checked out? What could you tell?
Well, the jury was very attentive during this, because when I always say the word tennis match eyes, because that really what it is, where it's like Nicole Westmoreland asks a question, then they go to Dawn Richard. Dawn Richard answers the question, then they go to Nicole Westmoreland. I saw some of the jurors taking notes. I saw some of them looking at the exhibits, which there weren't too many exhibits during Dawn's testimony. It wasn't like a whole bunch of text messages that we got during Cassie's testimony, or even like Carrie Morgan's testimony that we'll get to in just a little bit. But as far as just Dawn Richard's testimony overall, I felt like the jury was maybe thrown for a loop a little bit once cross-examination happened, because I myself, if I was a juror on there, I'd be like, oh, wow, so you said this here, but you didn't say this here, and yet I know you're trying to be honest and tell your statements aren't making the most sense. And so I can only imagine what the jury was feeling. It's like being checked out. Didn't see any of that.
Okay. Now we move on to Carrie Morgan, somebody that we heard about last week when Cassandra Ventura Fine was taking the stand and was testifying. My understanding, this is Cassandra Ventura Fine's former best friend, not current best friend. Talk to us about the highlights from her direct examination. Then we'll move into cross. But first, direct examination. And do we have an understanding about why she is no longer friends with Cassie?
Well, Jesse, I got to tell you, it's pretty simple as to why Carrie and Cassie are no longer friends, and that answer is simply the defendant being Diddy. And I'll get to the reason why in just a second. But Carrie specifically, Carrie Morgan, was somebody that I personally myself was interested in all that she had to say. She has been Cassie's best friend for a number of years. They were best friends for about 17 years, and then it was just one incident that happened in 20 that just kind of dismantled everything as far as their friendship goes, to the point that the two no longer even speak to one another, even though we all know that Cassie is no longer with Diddy in this situation. And I'll explain more just about that right now. But I thought one interesting point from Carrie's testimony today was that she did not want to testify. She had said that in open court today. She said the only reason she was testifying was because she was subpoenaed to testify, so she was required to do so. But I will say, just in respects to the difference between Dawn Richard, who appeared very nervous, very kind of quiet and timid as far as on the witness stand, from somebody who maybe Carrie, who flat out.
And sippers, I want to let everybody know we are catching up from Friday until today, okay? I am also a busy woman, so I will not be live every single day, especially just about Diddy, but I am going to cover everything and all of the trial. Okay, we are catching up with Diddy. Cassie testified. We've got the security guard that testified, the escort that testified, Carrie, her friend that testified, Don Richardson that testified, and her mom that testified, maybe another person that testified. And we're going to finish up with that today strong on Tanisha Talks Tea. Remember, when you come into the tea room to fill up your cup with this tea, and like and subscribe. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Remember to show your support by liking, subscribing, and sharing. It's a blessing. Thanks for watching. Remember to show your support by liking, subscribing, and sharing. It's a blessing. Keep your teacups filled and ready for my next upload. Until then, stay inspired and remember, always stay sifted.